Grandma's trust, said the first granddaughter to marry gets the $5.2 million estate. My sister threw a wedding with a DJ stage. Right where the 100-year-old willow still stands today. But she forgot one tiny detail: I was already married. The smell of antiseptic and stale coffee was my normal for 6 months. Leah, the dry, practical certified public accountant, spent that time curled on a vinyl hospital sofa, learning to read the fluctuations of the heart monitor like a foreign language. My grandmother was my world. I read her Jane Austen, hoping the rhythm of the words would somehow reach her through the ventilator. I learned to distinguish between the good nurses and the ones whose charting I needed to double-check. I was the steady, quiet presence. Meanwhile, my sister, Penelope, was posting sunset photos from Tulum, Mexico. When I called her, weeping, to tell her the doctors weren't hopeful, the thumping bass from her hotel room nearly blew out the phone speaker. "Oh, Leah, don't be so dramatic," she'd chirped, the sound grating. "Being around sick people will stop me from being positive. I need positive energy for my live stream. You take care of Grandma. Bye." The line went dead. That sharp click was the sound of a long, held illusion shattering completely. Penelope wasn't just thoughtless, she was a parasite. My grandmother finally passed away on a Tuesday in late January. 3 days later, we gathered in the grand living room of Harrington Manor. The estate, built in 1920, with its wraparound porch and 20 acres of pristine Vermont lakefront. The manor, a high-end wedding venue, generated a net profit of around $450,000 annually. My parents sat looking solemn but expectant. Penelope perched on the arm of the sofa, already checking her reflection in her turned-off phone screen. Attorney Gibson, a man with the kind of white hair and steady gaze that comes from 5 decades of family law, cleared his throat. Margaret Harrington was exceptionally specific, he stated. This document was revised 6 times. My father interrupted. "Well, understand she wanted everything to go to the girls." "Not exactly," Gibson corrected gently. The temperature in the room plummeted. He explained the terms. The entire Harrington Manor, including all buildings, land, furnishings, and business operations, has been transferred into a revocable living trust. Beneficiary rights and control of the asset will automatically activate immediately for whichever granddaughter presents a legal, certified marriage certificate to the trustee first. My parents erupted. "That's insane!" "We're her children." My father's face was already turning the familiar shade of crimson. Penelope was speechless for once, her mouth hanging slightly open. The words, "first to marry," had bypassed years of expectation and probate, creating an instant, high-stakes race. Grandma, in her own sharp way, had created a chaos engine designed to expose character and demand action. I looked across the room at Mark Sullivan, my fiancé of 5 years, who was trying to blend into the shadows by the fireplace. Mark was a certified arborist, a quiet, gentle man, but he was fiercely observant. He'd supported me through every agonizing minute of my grandmother's illness. I watched him process the lawyer's words. He didn't gasp or complain. He simply tilted his head, calculating. Later that evening, in our small, quiet apartment, I collapsed onto the couch. "It's impossible," I whispered. "Penelope will find some random groom in an afternoon. She has 80,000 followers. I have sensible shoes and a 5-year plan." Mark sat beside me. He didn't use sentimentality. He used logic. "Leah," he said softly. "Did he say, host a wedding, or wear a white dress?" "He said certified marriage certificate," I replied, feeling my CPA brain finally kick in. "The legal term, the paper trail." "Exactly," Mark confirmed, his voice taking on a new, thrilling edge. He didn't say anything about flowers, music, or a party. He said, "This paper. We have a certificate. We just haven't signed it yet. We've been planning October for the leaves. But the trust doesn't care about the leaves." A wave of determination, cold and clear, washed over me, displacing the years of hurt. This wasn't about love. Mark and I already had that. This was about strategy and protecting the legacy my grandmother had entrusted to the one person who truly cared. It was about standing up to the emotional abuse, with the one thing Penelope couldn't fight: irrefutable proof. "Do you want to go to City Hall on your lunch break tomorrow?" Mark asked. Tomorrow was Valentine's Day, ironically. I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I whispered. "Let's execute the contract." The next day, while Penelope was busy planning her engagement photo shoot, Mark and I quietly initiated a $5.2 million coup. Secured with a $50 administrative fee and a simple, genuine promise. The certificate was within my grasp. Having made the decision to act, Mark and I proceeded with our practical plan to secure the trust immediately. The next day, Valentine's Day, we went to City Hall on my lunch break. The clerk was a tired-looking woman in her 50s who barely glanced up from her computer. There were no flowers, no music, no photographer. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the scratch of two pens signing official documents. The process took 20 minutes. When the clerk handed us the certified marriage certificate, she offered us mints and a quiet "Congratulations." It was the perfect low-key, legally binding execution of our agreement. We had secured the $5.2 million estate for the price of a $50 administrative fee. We stepped outside, holding our matching copies of the paper, suddenly feeling the warmth of the sun and the reality of what we had done. This was the moment of truth. I pulled out my phone and called my mother.
"Leah,
"This isn't a good time," she answered, her voice tight with excitement. "I'm at the florist with Penelope, looking at centerpieces. She's moving so fast, isn't she wonderful?" "Mom, I need to tell you something important," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mark and I got married today. We went to City Hall. I have the certificate right here. And I'm going to take it to Attorney Gibson tomorrow morning." The silence on the line was instant and total. Then the ice came. "Stop it, Leah," my mother said, her voice cold and sharp. "Stop it right now. Signing administrative papers is not a wedding. That's not how this works. Don't overshadow Penelope's glory with some pathetic courthouse stunt." I felt the years of being second best slam into me. "Mom, it's not a stunt. We're legally—" "I don't want to hear it," she snapped. "This is exactly the kind of selfish, attention-seeking behavior I'd expect from you. Penelope is planning something beautiful, something meaningful. You don't get to ruin that with your jealousy." Click. The line went dead. Mark put his arm around me. "We knew this might happen," he murmured. Their approval was never part of the plan. He was right, but the humiliation still burned. I had secured a $5.2 million asset, and all I got was a lecture about jealousy and a dial tone. The public, cold rejection reinforced my decision. I could not fight this battle on emotional ground. I had to stay strictly and surgically on legal territory. That weekend, I went to the post office. I sent a formal, official announcement of the marriage, along with a certified copy of the registration, to my parents' house via certified mail. I specifically addressed it to Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, ensuring it looked official. I tracked the delivery confirmation. It was signed for 3 days later. Later, I learned why I received no response. My cousin Lucas, who still maintained contact with the main family line, reluctantly called me. He confirmed that Penelope had intercepted the certified mail herself. She had signed for the delivery, seen my name, and instantly ripped up the marriage registration, tossing it into the kitchen trash, before my parents even saw the envelope. "She told Mom and Dad you were sending them spam," Lucas admitted, sounding miserable. Penelope wasn't just hiding information. She was actively gaslighting the entire family into believing I was the jealous, unstable rival. She followed this up by logging into the family email account and setting up an automatic filter to delete everything from my address containing the word wedding. She didn't want the news to reach Attorney Gibson or my parents. She wanted a clear path for her own extravagant wedding plan. Penelope, meanwhile, was moving at lightning speed. Within a week, she had engaged a lifestyle content creator named Seth, whose smile was great for the camera but never reached his eyes. They had been dating for 3 weeks. She quickly announced their wedding date, 6 weeks away. The manor was immediately filled with contractors, as Penelope began massive, unauthorized renovations, painting over my grandmother's sage green walls with modern white and ordering Italian velvet curtains. She was investing heavily in her own delusion. I sat at my desk, watching her live streams of the renovation progress, my stomach tight with anger and professional obligation. Every dollar she spent was a liability I would eventually have to untangle. I had tried to warn them, but they had chosen their favorite narrative. That Lee was jealous and wrong, and Penelope was right and beautiful. I stopped trying to communicate. My focus shifted entirely to the legal filing and the strategic documentation. The marriage certificate was secured, but now I needed evidence of the damage. My plan to win had just shifted from a quiet legal transaction to a financial ambush. Leah's attempts to stop the financial hemorrhaging of the estate were immediately met with parental dismissal and denial. I had tried to warn them that they were investing thousands into a property that legally was not theirs to control, but my mother's latest tirade had shut that down. I realized that my voice, the voice of the sensible CPA, carried zero weight against the golden child's influence. Now, my world was dominated by Penelope's live streams. Twice a day, my phone buzzed with notifications showing the latest extravagant upgrade to Harrington Manor. I was forced to watch as Penelope, dressed in various designer outfits, gushed to her 80,000 followers about her vision. "You guys, the transformation is insane," she'd squeal, panning her camera across the banquet hall. "We're erasing Grandma's gloominess to create the ultimate destination location." The renovation costs were staggering. Penelope was spending money from what I strongly suspected was the educational fund grandmother had established for both of us, while my parents were dipping into their retirement savings. I saw new Italian light fixtures, velvet curtains in a specific shade of blush pink, and the antique oak floors sanded down and refinished to a modern, honey gold shine, according to Lucas, who was sending me guilt-ridden text messages. My parents had spent $32,000 to simply change the paint color in the banquet hall from my grandmother's gentle sage green to a bright, modern white. In total, the unauthorized expenses I tracked exceeded $52,000 and were rising daily. I was building a case against my own family, logging every receipt and every arrogant declaration. Then came the final, unforgivable transgression. During one late-night live stream, Penelope paused her tour to stand by a massive window overlooking the lake. "And here's the best news," she announced, her smile sharp and predatory. "See that old, drooping willow tree? It looks haunted, right? Next week, the logging crew is coming. Boom. It's gone. That spot will become a massive DJ stage, looking straight out over the water. We are saying goodbye to Grandma's gloominess to welcome an era of partying." My blood ran cold. That wasn't just a tree. It was the centerpiece of the estate. Planted in 1924, the year my grandmother was born. It was her favorite place, where she spent every healthy afternoon reading. Penelope wasn't just renovating. She was destroying the last piece of my grandmother's quiet, meaningful legacy. I made one last attempt to stop the financial and spiritual hemorrhaging. I called my mother, my voice tight. "Mom, please listen to me. You cannot spend money on renovations at the manor. You don't have authorization. You especially cannot cut down that willow." "Shut up, Leah," she shouted. Using my original name, the voice I recognized from every childhood argument where I was deemed wrong. You are just jealous. This is an investment in Penelope's future. Ayo, she's creating a life. You are a bitter, jealous person and I'm ashamed to call you my daughter right now. Don't contact me again. Click. I sat there, staring at the muted phone screen. My attempt at emotional defense had failed completely. The years of emotional avoidance finally broke. I realized that my family had no intention of ever seeing me, the quiet CPA, as anything other than a petty rival. They had chosen their narrative, and their refusal to hear the truth had now put them directly in my sights. Mark found me staring blankly at the wall. I told him about the tree. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, surgical calculation. Then don't stop them, he said, his voice quiet but firm. They won't listen, but every dollar they spend, and every lie Penelope tells about her authority, increases the asset value for us. And every step she takes toward that tree is a quantifiable legal liability. He was right. I was a certified public accountant. Spreadsheets were my weapon, and the law was my shield. My conscience was completely clear. I had warned them multiple times. They had chosen to ignore me, spend money, and threaten my grandmother's legacy. Whatever trap was sprung next would be entirely of their own making. I would let them increase the asset value for me, making the ambush all the more sweeter. My next step was not a warning, it was a final legal filing. With the family fully invested in the wedding, and unwilling to listen to my warnings, I took the final, decisive legal step. It was time to formalize my ownership before Penelope's logging crew could touch the willow tree. I called Attorney Gibson. His secretary ushered me into his downtown office, a wood-paneled room that smelled pleasantly of old books and leather. Gibson looked up from his desk, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips when he saw the documents in my hand. Lee. He corrected, using my legal name for my professional credentials. I had a feeling I'd be seeing you. I placed the certified marriage certificate on his desk. The conditions of the trust have been fully met, I stated. He picked it up and examined it thoroughly, his expression turning serious. Indeed, they have. This is a certified marriage certificate issued by the state of Vermont, properly filed. Congratulations, Mrs. He noted my continued use of my maiden name. Smart. For professional reasons. All your credentials are under Harrington. He pulled a different, thicker folder from his drawer. Leah, as of this moment, you are the sole legal owner of Harrington Manor. All property, all business assets, all accounts associated with the estate. The trust was designed to activate immediately upon presentation of this document. No probate, no waiting period. The words washed over me. Sole legal owner. It was real. The strategic, logical action I had taken now had absolute, undeniable power. I felt a surge of triumph mixed with an intense focus. I had won the race. But the battle was just beginning. Gibson began drafting a formal notice of ownership on his computer. I'll file this with the county recorder's office today. I'll also send a notice of ownership and preservation order to your parents' address. They are currently listed as property managers in the interim period, which is now terminated. They'll need to cease any decisions regarding the property and return all keys and access codes to you within 30 days. What about the renovations and the preservation of the estate? I asked, thinking specifically of the willow. Gibson's expression hardened. The preservation clause I mentioned at the reading is active now. Any significant alterations to the property require board approval, which I chair. Furthermore, Vermont has extremely strict laws about heritage trees on protected properties. That willow tree is a landmark. If anyone, including your family, attempts to cut it down without your written authorization as the owner, they are liable for restoration costs, diminished property value, and potentially punitive damages. He emphasized the point. The act of intentionally cutting down someone else's tree. Timber trespass. is subject to treble damages. He paused, letting the term sink in. If they touch that willow, they are looking at $250,000 liability. Use that information wisely. I took the warning to heart. My sister had just given me a massive, quantifiable lever to use against her. Immediately after our meeting, Gibson sent the official notice of ownership and preservation order via certified mail to my parents' house. Ironically, Penelope, still blinded by her entitlement, was the person who signed for it, and once again, she hid it away. She believed it was just troublesome paperwork from a senile old lawyer trying to complicate her wedding plans. She had signed a legal document acknowledging ownership transfer, and then immediately suppressed the evidence, thinking she was protecting her scheme. They continued to believe they were the masters of the manor, frantically preparing for the wedding. While I held the legally certified deed and the explicit protection of the law, I had secured the legal control, but I needed to secure the tactical advantage. Mark and I spent the rest of the week preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Knowing that Penelope's wedding was imminent, we created a meticulous, legally defensible, pre-printed itemized invoice. It detailed market, rate venue rental fees, emergency booking surcharges, and high-cost insurance fees to cover the risk of damage to the historic property. We built a six-figure debt instrument based on her arrogance. The money they were spending on renovations, the pain they had caused me, and the threat to the tree. It was all condensed into a single, devastating piece of paper that would be deployed at the precise moment of Penelope's greatest triumph. The final physical confrontation was set for the rehearsal dinner. The wedding weekend was upon us. Mark and I had received an invitation to the rehearsal dinner, not from my parents, but forwarded from my guilt-ridden cousin, Lucas. The heavy cardstock was etched with gold foil lettering, a testament to the thousands of dollars being sunk into this charade. We knew we were walking into a trap, but we were ready to spring our own. We arrived at Harrington Manor as the sun was setting over the lake, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and pink. It was stunning. The banquet hall, newly renovated with money that was supposed to be my parents' retirement fund, glowed like a fairy tale. The expensive Italian chandeliers Penelope had insisted upon cast warm light across the refinished oak floors. The blush pink velvet curtains, as sourced by her interior designer, framed the windows perfectly. The house looked magnificent, undeniably beautiful, and indisputably mine. Penelope was holding court near the bar, looking radiant in a white dress that was clearly expensive, though not her official wedding gown. She was surrounded by her influencer friends, all of them filming each other, and the elaborate floral arrangements. She was in her element, intoxicated by the spectacle she had created. Mark and I were merely background extras in her story. As soon as we walked in, Penelope spotted us. Her triumphant smile faltered for just a second, before she smoothed it back into place, gliding over to intercept us. She pulled me slightly aside, her grip on my arm a little too tight to be purely sisterly affection. "Oh my gosh, Lee," she chirped, using my professional name with a saccharine sweetness that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm so glad you could make it. Though I have to say." Her gaze dropped pointedly to my left hand, where my simple sterling silver wedding band caught the light. "Why are you wearing a ring that looks like it came from a candy box? Did Mark buy it?" The ring had cost $300, all Mark and I could comfortably afford, but he had chosen it with care, and I loved it for its simplicity and sincerity. "It's my wedding ring, Penelope," I stated calmly, refusing to meet her condescension with argument. "I happen to like it." She laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "Wedding ring, please. You signed some papers at City Hall." That's not a wedding. That's just sad desperation." She dismissed me with a flick of her hand and turned to Mark, who had been standing quietly beside me. holding the briefcase containing his laptop and the itemized invoice. "Tell your boyfriend to stand in the back," she instructed, her tone pure entitlement. "We are out of seats. The head tables are reserved for the actual family." Mark's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, honoring our pre-arranged signal to endure the insult. We knew this was necessary. This was the final, perfect moment of her hubris. "That's fine," I said pleasantly. "We'll find somewhere to sit." We ended up at a small, peripheral table, partially hidden by one of her expensive velvet curtains. From there, we had a flawless vantage point of the entire room, especially the head table where my parents sat beaming, already celebrating a victory that was not yet theirs. They thought they had won. They thought I was the loser who had to sit in the extra seat, wearing my candy box ring, watching the sister they adored triumph. I saw the cost of the renovations around me. The $20,000 chandelier, the $32,000 paint job. All of it my property now. Thanks to their arrogance and my sister's interception of the certified mail. I reached into my handbag. Next to my wallet and my sensible lipstick, my fingers brushed the cool surface of the printed paper. The invoice. It was meticulously calculated, absolutely devastating, and ready for deployment. Mark leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. "You ready?" he asked, his voice low. I looked across the room at Penelope. She was standing up, raising her champagne flute, ready to make her triumphant toast. The toast that would include the declaration about destroying the willow tree, about destroying my grandmother's memory. The final insult was about to be delivered. I touched the invoice one last time. "I'm ready," I whispered back. I smiled. The trap was set. The final insult was about to be delivered, sealing the family's fate. I watched from my corner table as Penelope rose to the stage. The newly installed Italian chandelier casting dramatic shadows across her face. She lifted her champagne flute, and the sound of the glass tapping for attention silenced the banquet hall. "Cheers to me," she announced, her voice echoing off the newly refinished oak floors. She gestured broadly toward the expensive renovations. "And Mom and Dad, look at these new floors and the Italian curtains. Aren't they beautiful?" My parents beamed, glowing with pride. My father enthusiastically nodded from the head table. Penelope paused for dramatic effect, savoring the anticipatory silence. "But here is the best news." Her smile widened into something sharp and predatory. "You all know that old, drooping willow tree by the lake. It looks like it's haunted. Next week, the logging crew is coming. Boom. The tree will be gone. That spot will become a massive DJ stage, looking straight out over the lake. We are saying goodbye to Grandma's gloominess to welcome an era of partying." My parents applauded immediately. "Great idea, sweetie," my mother chirped. "That tree is too old anyway." The sound of their clapping, agreeing to the destruction of my grandmother's most sacred space, felt like a physical assault. My blood rushed to my brain. The declaration about sending away Grandma's gloominess still hung in the elegant air. A death sentence for the sentinel that had shaded her for a century. That tree had stood by that lake for 100 years. It had been there when my grandmother was a bride herself. And now my sister wanted to turn it into firewood, all for better lighting on her social media content. I felt the sound of my patience shattering into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Mark squeezed my hand under the table, a triple pulse. Our signal. This time, he didn't wait for my response. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the polished floor loud enough to cut through the applause. The sound was sharp, dominating. "You will not touch a single root of that willow tree, Penelope," he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of conviction, commanding immediate silence. Penelope's face cycled through surprise, amusement, and settled on condescending irritation. She rolled her eyes dramatically. "Sit down. Leah. And your boyfriend, too. The homeowner is speaking. That was the line. I stood up beside Mark, my napkin falling forgotten to the floor. My voice came out sharp and cold, each word precisely enunciated, like I was reading numbers from a balance sheet. That is exactly the problem. The homeowner is speaking, and she is telling you to get the hell out of her house. My father laughed, a nervous, braying sound. Enough with the dramatics. We've all been patient with your little tantrum, but… Mark, I said quietly, not taking my eyes off Penelope's face. Show them. My gentle, patient, background, dwelling husband placed his leather briefcase on the head table with a decisive thunk that made the wine glasses tremble. Penelope, of course, had dismissed the briefcase as part of his trying too hard aesthetic. She had no idea that it contained the instrument of her undoing. He opened his laptop with practiced efficiency and connected it to the venue's projection system. We had asked the catering staff to set it up earlier, claiming we wanted to show a slideshow of family photos. They'd been happy to oblige. Please, Mark said, his voice carrying across the room as the projector hummed to life. Look at the screen. The first document that appeared was the confirmation paper from the trust. Official and unmistakable, with the state seal of Vermont clearly visible in the corner. Below it, a certified copy of the property deed, dated 2 years ago, with my name, Leah Marie Harrington, listed as the sole legal owner. I watched the color drain from Penelope's face. The foundation couldn't hide the way her skin went from influencer bronze to ash gray in the span of 3 seconds. What? She started, but her voice cracked. That's impossible. Leah, what is this? Some kind of forgery? Call Attorney Gibson if you don't believe me, I said, setting my phone on the table. His number's right here. He's the successor trustee. He'll confirm everything you're seeing on that screen. My father was on his feet now, his face turning purple. Your grandmother would never. Grandma did exactly this. I interrupted, my voice flat and factual. 2 years ago, when she got sick and you all were too busy to visit. When Penelope was posting beach photos from Tulum, instead of coming home. When I was the one sitting with her in the hospital, holding her hand while she made her decisions. Mark stepped forward, his posture different now, shoulders back, chin up. He wasn't the quiet man who blended into the background. He was the certified arborist, and a man protecting his wife and her legacy. Penelope, he said, his voice taking on a professional tone that commanded attention. You should Google the phrase tree law before you call those loggers. She blinked at him, confusion mixing with anger. Tree law. What are you even? That willow is what we call a specimen tree. Mark continued, pulling a folder from his briefcase. It's over 100 years old, planted in 1924. As a certified arborist, which is my actual profession, I've appraised its value at $80,000. The number hung in the air. But listen carefully, Mark said, steel in his voice. Vermont state law stipulates that the act of intentionally cutting down someone else's tree, that's called timber trespass, is subject to treble damages. That means triple compensation. He let that sink in. That means the moment your saw blade touches the bark of that tree, you will owe my wife and me $240,000. Add in legal fees and court costs, and the figure will rise to $250,000. Wife, my mother said faintly. I pulled the certified marriage certificate, which Mark had framed in a simple silver frame, from my purse. I set it on the table in front of her. We got married on Valentine's Day, I said. At City Hall. It was perfect. The silence, following the reveal of the marriage certificate, and the $240 tree law liability was absolute. My mother's hand flew to her chest. My father's face was a mask of barely controlled rage, but it was Penelope who was fascinating to watch. Her influencer brain was visibly cycling through the financial implications, the cost of the lawsuit, the public humiliation, And the crushing debt. You can't do this. Penelope stammered, her voice stripped of its usual confidence. This is my wedding. You're being selfish and… selfish? The word came out of me as a flat, professional statement, not a question. You want to talk about selfishness? Let's talk about selfishness. You want the wedding to continue. I didn't wait for her answer. I reached into my handbag and pulled out the printed itemized invoice. Printed on my professional letterhead. It was the weapon I had meticulously constructed. I threw it onto the table in front of Penelope. It landed with a satisfying slap against the polished wood. I said, my voice calm and professional. The tone I used when dealing with difficult clients trying to skirt tax codes. Pay up. I picked up the invoice and read the line items aloud, ensuring the entire room, including the frozen catering staff, could hear every single, legally defensible charge. Market rate venue rental fee, for a 12-bedroom historic estate, $15,000. Emergency service fee for booking under 24 hours notice, $35,000. Tree risk insurance fee to protect specimen vegetation from negligent action, $50,000. Emotional distress compensation fee, $30,000. I looked up and met Penelope's terrified eyes. The total comes to $130,000. My mother was on her feet now, her chair knocked backward. You are crazy! How dare you charge your sister money? For her wedding, in her own family home. I leaned in close to her and Penelope, close enough that my father and Seth could not quite hear. I know Penelope tore up the certified mail I sent to Mom and Dad. I whispered. My mother's face went instantly pale. She knew I had the proof. Mom? Did you know that intentionally destroying someone else's United States Postal Service mail is mail fraud? That's a federal crime. I don't think you want me to file a police report right before the wedding photos are taken. Penelope visibly shrank back. She knew I had the leverage to ruin her reputation forever. Far beyond just this wedding. I straightened up, returning to my professional, loud tone for the benefit of the room. Penelope, this is a simple business transaction. You want a luxury venue. You pay the venue fee. The venue policy is strict, payment in full prior to the event. My father attempted to interject with a placating tone. Leah, let's all calm down. We can discuss finances later after. No, Dad. We discuss it now. I cut him off calmly. But since I'm family, I'll waive the emotional distress fee and the emergency booking surcharge. I pulled out my phone and opened the calculator app, punching in numbers for effect. I'm offering a settlement of $25,000. It covers the base rental and a portion of the risk insurance. I looked at my parents. A's for the $52,000 you and Penelope spent renovating my house. $32,000 from you, $20,000 from her. Consider it a non-refundable deposit, a housewarming gift that I graciously accept. You can't expect us to carry that much cash. My father sputtered, his face purpling again. I'm a CPA, Dad. I don't want cash. I want a paper trail, I said, pulling a blank check request form and a pen from my purse. Write a personal check? Or make a wire transfer? I don't care. But the funds need to be secured tonight. I set the pen down on top of the form with a decisive click. If payment isn't received in the next 10 minutes, I said, letting my eyes move across each face at the table, then the venue is officially closed. Mark will lock the gates, and I will cancel the security detail for tomorrow. Penelope can explain to her 80,000 followers why her wedding was canceled due to a venue dispute. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by my mother's sudden, broken weeping. They realized I wasn't threatening violence. I was threatening their image, their social standing, and Penelope's career. It was a cold, hard choice between humiliation and compliance. I was calm, detached, and utterly free of the need for their love. And that was the most terrifying thing of all for them. Mark stood beside me, solid and protective, my anchor in the storm of their emotional collapse. I had played the long game, and the checkbook was about to be opened. That night ended not with the sound of party music, but with weeping, blame, and the desperate scratch of a pen against a checkbook. My mother cried through the entire process, her tears falling onto the velvet settee she had bought for my house. My father's hand shook as he wrote, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. Penelope sat frozen in her chair, mascara tracking down her face in ugly black rivers, while her new husband Seth nervously rubbed her back and stared at the itemized invoice. The check was exactly $25,000, made out to Leah Harrington, with the words, "Venue fee," scribbled hurriedly in the memo line. I held it up to the Italian light fixture, checking the date and signature one final time, ensuring its validity before folding it carefully and placing it securely in my wallet. "The wedding will proceed tomorrow at 2 o'clock as planned," I announced, my voice businesslike and detached. "Mark and I will not be attending. We have other commitments." "Other commitments," my mother wept. "Leah, you can't just. This is your sister's wedding. And this is my honeymoon funding," I replied, already gathering my things. "Mark, are you ready?" He closed his briefcase with a decisive snap. Ready, we walked out of that banquet hall together, leaving behind a room full of shocked faces and broken illusions. The night air was cool against my face, carrying the scent of fresh possibilities. I slid into the passenger seat of our car, feeling lighter than I had in years. "You were amazing in there," Mark said as he started the engine. "We were amazing?" I corrected. "That whole tree lost speech. You actually scared them." He grinned, that rare, full smile that transformed his face. "I've been practicing." I wanted to make sure I got the legal terminology exactly right. Mark and I were 30,000 feet above the Atlantic when Penelope was saying her vows. We had used that $25,000 to book first-class tickets to Italy. The flight attendant brought us champagne in actual glass flutes, and Mark toasted to the coolest negotiation I've ever witnessed. I thought about my family, trapped in the expensive nightmare they had created. "Do you think they'll ever forgive us?" "Probably not," I said, watching the clouds drift by below us. "But I don't think I need them to." "It makes you free," he said simply, and he was right. For the first time in my 32 years, I felt completely, utterly free. I kept the Manor, of course. I wasn't going to let Penelope's tantrum or my parents' disappointment drive me away from my inheritance. But I didn't want to live there full-time. Instead, I handed it over to a specialized property management company that ran historic bed and breakfasts and event venues. They performed a market analysis and confirmed the estate was profitable. Weddings, corporate retreats, historical society tours. There was a whole market for authentic New England manor experiences that didn't involve entitled influencers. The willow tree became part of the venue's appeal. The management company even hired Mark as a consultant to develop a heritage tree preservation program. I've ensuring that the tree would be protected and maintained for another 100 years. As for Penelope, Lucas kept me updated. She and Seth were living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment. The influencer income wasn't what it used to be, her engagement rates were dropping, and she was having to work, at a boutique marketing firm, trying to pay off the credit card debt she'd racked up on wedding expenses. She calls Mom crying at least once a week. Lucas told me during one of our secret coffee meetings. Says she can't believe you did this to her, that you ruined her life. I didn't ruin her life, I said, stirring sugar into my latte. I just stopped letting her ruin mine. My mother stopped inviting me to family dinners. My father stopped calling with financial advice. Penelope blocked me on every social media platform, and their absence felt less like a loss and more like a relief. Mark and I built our own traditions, quiet dinners where nobody competed for attention, and monthly visits to the manor to check on the property and visit the willow tree. My lawyer, Attorney Gibson, remained professionally neutral but told me over lunch that this was the most satisfying case he'd seen in 30 years. "You used every tool at your disposal," he said, shaking his head with admiration. "The trust law, the tree law, the mail fraud leverage, the itemized invoice. It was a master class in strategic planning. I learned from the best," I said. "My grandmother didn't leave me that estate just because she loved me. She left it to me because she knew I'd protect it, that I'd understand what it meant. I had saved my grandmother's legacy. I got a $52,000 renovation for free, and I got out from under the weight of a family that had never quite figured out how to love me without conditions. I think my grandmother would have agreed.